welcome, and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. My name is Bill McAuliffe. I'm the Superintendent of Schools, and tonight's meeting is here to provide an update on the work of the Redistricting Advisory Committee and to allow for you to provide feedback and comments on the presentation for tonight. Sitting up front are members of the Redistricting Advisory Committee. You may recognize some of them. So I'm sure many of you are anxious to speak, and you will certainly get that opportunity. But before we get to that, I would ask you to be a little patient, as there is an agenda that we would like to get through before we open it up. I will spend a little time on reviewing why we're here, why redistricting and why for 2013. I'll go over the guiding principles and considerations that the committee has been working with in going through this process. I'll briefly explain the three models that I would assume almost all of you, maybe every one of you, have seen. They've been posted on the website for the last 5 days or so. And then I'll conclude by summarizing the next steps. Where do we go from here? And then we'll open it up. So I really am, I promise, I really am going to try to be as brief as I can in getting through these slides and delivering the presentation. However, I'm looking around and I recognize many of you, and many of you have heard me speak before. And you may have come to the conclusion that sometimes brevity is a real challenge for me. So I've asked a couple of the committee members to prompt me. If I'm going too long on a slide, I've asked them to let me know so I can move on. Because tonight is about you providing us feedback. So if you hear someone on the committee calling my name, yelling, "Bill," I don't think they're heckling me. They may be, but they're urging me to move on. So why now? Why redistrict in 2013? For most of you who have been following this process, you already know the answer to that. But basically, enrollment growth and capacity in our 5 schools is a huge issue. It's an issue we've been faced with for many years. In the last 15 years, the school population in Winchester has grown by 37%, from about 3,200 students in 1997 to nearly 4,400 students, a little over perhaps what we're projecting for September 2012. Now, this chart shows what the current capacity is expected to be in September compared to what we anticipate the capacity of the buildings to be in the 5 schools when the new Vincent Owens School opens in 2013. But it's important to understand that current capacity, as outlined on this slide, has been realized by taking specialist space and turning it into classroom space in virtually all of our schools. We've also added 4 portable classrooms, 2 at Ambrose and 2 at Morocco in the last 3 years. So in terms of specialist space, we're talking about music classrooms converted into regular classrooms. We're talking about reading rooms, reading classrooms converted to general classrooms, ELL instructional space, computer labs, and even special education resource room space. Now, enrollment growth, especially over the last 10 years, has driven, in this community, the various school construction projects. If you look at this slide, you'll see that in 2002, we had about 1,800 students, and in 2002, the newly renovated Lincoln School reopened after being closed for 2 years. 3 years later, the Ambrose School, the newly rebuilt and enlarged Ambrose School opened in 2005. That time, there was the enrollment in the school was 1861. Actually, when the Lincoln School opened, it was 1,664 students. 4 years later, we had to add 2 portable classrooms at Ambrose, the brand new school, the newest school, 2 portables at Morocco. In 2009, we also built a 12-room addition to the McCall Middle School. And in 2013, we'll open the Vincent Owens School. So you see that for the 2013 target date, we will have increased capacity at the 2 currently least populated schools, the Lynch School and the Vincent Owens School. By redistricting, our goal is to redistribute the increased enrollment and to reclaim the needed space in almost all of our elementary schools. The Vincent Owens new construction project will add 6 new classrooms, about 120 students, and through the relocation of the administrative offices now located at Lynch School, and an important part of the Parkhurst School project that was completed last summer, in addition to providing swing space for the Vincent Owens School, school administration offices will move out of Lynch into Parkhurst 2013, and that will create 3 additional classrooms at Lynch. So when you look at the information that has been posted and the information that's in the handout, you'll note that in the different models that are being presented tonight, there's 4 years worth of enrollment data. And it's important to understand that our target data, our target year, because those are the numbers we have the most confidence in right now, is the 2015-16 school year. Not that we don't have confidence in the 2016 year and beyond, but the census data that we're using, the demographic data that we're using, you have to understand that the data we have for 2016, which are currently 1-year-olds on the census data, it's 4 years away. So that's been a challenge. And then 2017 and beyond, those will include students and children who aren't on the census data or not yet born. So again, future space considerations at Vincent Owens. I'm trying to remember, I don't think we didn't have this information when we met in January. The construction bids for that school had not come in yet, but the construction bids came in such that the Vincent Owens School will be constructed with 3 additional classrooms that will be roughed out. And that was part of the plan. So eventually, that school will be able to have 24 classrooms as opposed to 21, which it is going to be constructed at. And some of our projections take into consideration or make an assumption, and you'll see this later on, that we may have to bring on those 3 additional classrooms in 1-year increments. And if we did that, that would increase the capacity at that particular building. Another potential for future expansion in 2016-17 on would be the possibility of moving the preschool program out of Lynch, which currently houses 6 classrooms, and perhaps relocating them to the Parkhurst School, where there will be space. And we have not necessarily factored that into our thinking. I'm sorry. So, just wanted to bring that to your attention. So, guiding principles and considerations. How the committee is kind of going through this difficult process. So, the guiding principles and considerations that you see up on the screen These aren't new. For those of you who were here in January, you saw these. These are some of the highest priorities in terms of principles and considerations that the committee are working with. Yeah, you go. Sorry. So, keeping in mind, as the committee has gone through their work, looking at physical learning environments, special needs and access to the buildings, equity in terms of class size, resources, access to learning and safety. One of the highest priorities, and this comes from the school committee in some of their direction to the Redistricting Advisory Committee, is protecting the class size guidelines that have been long in existence in Winchester, trying to devise models that would sustain future growth, if that in fact becomes a reality, and making every effort, and this is a challenge and we know it's tough, to be clear and straightforward and pursuing all reasonable models. In addition to these guiding principles, other considerations, specifically those that came from the earlier public meeting we had and were pretty loud and clear to the committee, the issue of how to get to school, school traffic, keeping neighborhoods together, and I know the committee members and I have been monitoring all of the comments in the email, so we clearly understand that that's an issue and concern, as well as the diversity of the student community and resource distribution. Some other considerations as the committee has gone through the process, really striving to keep the numbers manageable and to have schools with 500 or fewer kids. And also something that came through, especially in some of the early email communications we received, the concept of striving with any change to keep, to minimize the number of students and families impacted by redistricting. So some of the approaches and what the committee has looked at and, in fact, at this point, eliminated. So the committee looked at moving the preschool program to VO, designating schools as grade level, talked about that as a possible model in January. We looked at a model that where the Ambrose would become an early childhood center, pre-K and K, and then distribute grades 1 to 5 throughout the other 4 schools. And then we also looked at keeping the current district boundaries. What would that mean? It's like I've never done this before. Sorry about that. Thank you. So, just a little bit about the concept of moving the preschool with VO. The reasoning or the thought process behind this was that our enrollment projections suggest that by the time 2013 rolls around in another year, we'll be over the new design capacity of 2180 by about somewhere around 20 students. It's unbelievable, but that's what it suggests. So we were trying to find a way to mitigate against that. The preschool program will add 100 students to the Vincent Owens School, and that's the least dense area of the town, and would impact fewer numbers of students theoretically who would have to be redistricted there. Moving the preschool out of Lynch would create more classroom space at Lynch, and thus moving a school that has more room closer to Morocco and Lincoln, which currently are overcrowded. And there was a feeling or thought that Most preschool students do not walk. Most are driven, and so that wasn't as high a consideration. In looking at that, and looking at the numbers and how grades 1 to 4 would be distributed, this proposal was eliminated. Part of it was based on the preschool is not a part of the Vincent Owens School program that was approved by the State Building Authority 2 years ago when that program space was approved, and that could impact their funding. So we're going back to look at that again just to double check that, especially since our projections have increased since we last worked with the MSBA on that project. However, another reason was that the Lynch School would absorb all of the other overcrowding, and its capacity could be increased up to 540 students. And there were a number of issues and concerns, again, going back to our principles and considerations on that. The committee looked at redistricting by some configuration of grade level. So one of the models that the committee looked at, and this was a model that was set in January we would look at. Several scenarios were included in this review. We looked at housing all the fifth graders at the Lincoln School, the idea being that the Lincoln School next to the McCall School, and the K-4 at all the other schools, or in combination with that, splitting K2 and 3-4 between Ambrose and VO and Lynch and Morocco, creating sister schools. Again, some of the rationale there, looking at that because the density of the student population is inconsistent across the town. There was a feeling that this might enhance the equity of programming across the grades 1 to 4, and also would increase the boundaries, the school district boundaries of each school community. In the end, that model was eliminated and not considered further because, frankly, it was just not feasible. The numbers, no matter how they were put together, just didn't work in terms of meeting the capacities in all of the buildings. And it just didn't work in all of the various models that we looked at. And there was no combination of schools, whether it was 2 schools, 3 schools, 1 school with a standalone grade, K through 5, that would let that work. Another thought in terms of grade level configuration was to look at an early childhood center model. And that would be where the preschool and kindergartners from across the town would come together in one school. The concept behind that was to move that program to the Ambrose School and then distribute the grades 1 to 5 students across the other four schools. One of the rationales there is that from the census data for 2013, there were 458 students who lived west of Cambridge Street. And so the thinking is that those students could be districted to the Vincent Owens schools, grades 1 to 5. This would increase space again at the Lynch School, but make it a much larger school, but closer to the overcrowded Morocco and Lincoln schools. So again, the committee looked at this, looked at all kinds of iterations in terms of the numbers, but in the end, it was felt that there'd be a significant upheaval across town. Many of our families have students who are kindergartners and in grades 1 to 5. It would mean going to 2 different schools. It would mean multiple stops, and there was nothing significant gained in terms of capacity under that model. And then in the end, that model did not allow, or does not allow for future growth. So, we also looked at the current district boundaries, and in the end, again, after looking at this, the committee came to the conclusion that it wasn't feasible, that what it does is it perpetuates the current problem of overcrowding at Morocco, Lincoln, and Ambrose. So in my mind, certainly in the committee's mind, that clearly articulates what the problem is, the problem that we face, and the problem we're trying to solve. We need to relieve the overcrowding, and in order to do that, we need to move about 100 students out of Morocco and Lincoln, and 100 students into VO. The real challenge, and you know this just as well as we do, if you've been looking at the information, the real challenge is that in between the Vincent Owen and Morocco and Lincoln lies Ambrose and Lynch, and how we configure that. So, let's spend just a few minutes explaining the rationale behind the three models that are being presented. I will talk briefly about the next steps, and then we'll open it up. So Model J. So one of the most frequent comments that we heard beginning with the January meeting and following through email commentary on the website was that the committee considered the distance a student walks to school. So Model J, so the committee in developing this plan used a half-mile distance from a school's entry as the metric for determining school boundaries. Where possible, once that was done, where possible, lines were then extended to the end of street blocks to keep, quote, neighbors, not necessarily neighborhoods, although, believe it or not, there has been a strong effort to try to do that. I know would be a difference of opinion with many of you together. The reason why the half mile was used is that once we extended that metric to over a half mile, then the boundaries started crossing and overlapping. And that just didn't make any sense. So that's Model J, and that's the rationale. And it should be noted that in all of these models, there were many, many iterations that the committee looked at, and I believe there will be many more iterations that will be looked at as a result of the commentary and feedback. Model K. I just realized, going through this. So, J, K, and F, these aren't in alphabetical order. Please don't read anything into that. Okay? They're not being presented in any priority order by the committee. I want to be very clear about that. The committee, the committee hasn't had that discussion about prioritizing any of these models. These were the models as a result of the different iterations that the committee felt the strongest about. So, don't read into that. So Model K comes from feedback, previous feedback and suggestions related to the committee trying to minimize the number of students impacted by any redistricting process. So in this plan, and you'll note in your handout, in this plan, 152 students will be impacted in the fall of 2013. As you'll see from the map, in terms of the distribution across the schools currently on who would be impacted, under this plan, Lynch does not lose any students, but they gain students. Approximately 30 from Morocco and Lincoln are impacted, actually 29 and 30. And then the biggest impact, of course, is the Ambrose community. And in this case, it's 3 times the number of Morocco and Lincoln. And so in putting this model together, although more families are impacted from Ambrose, the committee in putting this iteration together, this model together, did try to move whole neighborhoods as much as possible. They tried. That's what this reflects. So, and I'm sure there'll be comments about that. And then F. So this map was drafted in an attempt, or in an effort, to more equitably distribute the impact of redistricting to all states. Thank you. Hey, the audience needs one.
Sorry, thank you again. One more.
So, again, so this model is an attempt to more equitably distribute the families and students impacted, and to distribute that equitably to all schools. Now, although there's about 30 more students impacted over the previous plan, the transitions are spread more evenly across town, but it should be noted that, again, Ambrose has the highest number that are impacted. And I hope people understand that that's probably going to be the case. And there's a feeling in the committee, in some of this discussion we've had, is that that this model also, in many ways, it would suggest that the equity of enrollment capacity, the distribution as we go through the first 4 years, gets us more equitably to capacity. But that can be debated, I'm sure. So, where to next? So the committee tonight will be listening to your feedback, listening to your comments. Over the last 4 or 5 days, we've received a number of comments by email, so thank you to those of you who have taken the time to do that. Given the timing of the upcoming break week, the committee will reconvene on Thursday, April 26th. However, between now and then, the committee individually will be sharing the comments, and committee members will be reviewing those, and we'll get back to work April 26th to refine these models in the process further. The hope is that either at the May 8th or May 22nd regular scheduled school committee meeting, the Redistricting Advisory Committee will present their final plan, their final work product. Whether it's one plan or two, the committee to look at, we don't know, but that'll be done either May 8th or May 22nd. We're trying to be flexible here so that we're not tying ourselves to May 8th and then thinking, we're close here, we may be able to do something that is much better than what's represented tonight, but we need a little more time. And my feeling is that we need to ensure that we take the time we need to make this the best plan possible. The school committee will schedule a public hearing on the committee's work sometime the end of May, very, very early June. And the school committee will want to hear your feedback on those final proposals as well. And then again, in an effort to be flexible so we don't box ourselves in, we've identified 3 meeting dates in June for the school committee to make a final decision on the redistricting plan. Now, I feel pretty safe on April 10th announcing, and this is the first public announcement, that the last day of school, I feel comfortable, will be June 12th. That's the 180th day of school. So, I hope I didn't jinx it. So we realize that the 19th is a week after school is out. I know the committee is going to try very, very, very hard to have a final decision by no later than the 12th. But we ask you to monitor that, and we we will be very clear as early as we possibly can in communicating, what that final schedule will be. Okay. So just a couple of kind of summarizing comments before we open it up. And really, thank you for your patience. We really appreciate it. So meeting target class size and protecting special spaces are the Redistricting Advisory Committee's top priorities. And they're the top priorities because those are the school committee's priorities, top priorities now as well. Developing maps that best meet capacity targets while protecting special spaces has gotten the committee to the point they're at now. What we most hope to hear tonight, and I want to be very, very clear about this, what we most hope to hear tonight is your solutions and suggestions of how best the Redistricting Advisory Committee could balance the competing considerations of walking to school, how to get to school, and any traffic management issues that are associated, keeping neighborhoods together, and the numbers or distribution of those numbers of those impacted by a plan. So I want to repeat that. Our hope to hear from you tonight is your solutions and suggestions of how best the committee could balance the competing considerations of the concept of walking to schools and the associated traffic, keeping neighborhoods together, and the numbers and distribution of those numbers impacted by a redistricting plan. I can't be clear enough. I can't be clear enough that no final decisions have been made. I have gotten a couple of emails directly to me about, I know I'm going to be redistricted because of such and such. I'd like to talk to you about X. And I just can't be clear enough. There are three models that this is where we're at. I think the committee would tell you that we know that they still need to be, there's still some adjustments that have to be made, we hope. And the best way that we can do that, we believe moving forward, is to hear your solutions and your suggestions. Now, one more thing, and again, I apologize. As I said at the outset, I've been monitoring, the committee has been monitoring all the emails and comments that have been coming in. I know that many of you are very anxious about this. Some are very concerned. Some of you actually, well, you're probably not in the wrong, but are very angry about these models. So I would only ask, as you make your comments tonight, if you could please try to be respectful. And again, we're here to listen to what you have to say. If you want to lash out at anybody, and I know nobody's going to do that, but lash out to me. I'm the paid public official, and these are just volunteer parents who are on the committee. So we know this is serious, and we know there's still a lot of work to do. So we're welcoming your comments and feedback tonight. We have a number of scribes who are going to be writing down your comments and then sharing them with the rest of the committee. So in order to do this, there's a microphone set up right down at this front of this aisle here. When I stop talking, which is going to be 1 second, I'm going to remove myself from this podium. I'll swing it out here. If you could queue up at the two microphones if you want to make comments. That way, everyone can hear you talking to the microphone like I just wasn't doing a second ago, so everyone can hear you. And if you could please just introduce yourself with your name and your address before you start speaking, that would be most appreciated. So again, thank you for your patience, and we'll open this up.
is Denise Golubus. I live on 21 Albemarle Road, and I'm here with the Westland Walkers. We're part of a neighborhood that encompasses through High Street, Cambridge, and Wildwood. So Oneida, Seneca, Penn, Blossom Hill, Atherton, Birch, Robin Hood, Albemarle, New Meadows, all the way up to the corner of Wildwood and Cambridge. First of all, I want to thank the committee on behalf of my group here. We know you guys have worked really hard, you've been very dedicated, you've listened. We appreciate that. We know at the last forum, most people came out in strong favor of the neighborhood school model, and we appreciate that you all listened and truly considered that. One thing I want to share up front is I've looked at a few education websites, and the definition for neighborhood school is a school in which most or all of the student population comes from the immediate geographic area in which the school is located. And I do believe that that was the sentiment in the last forum as to what we wanted to support and why we wanted to support that model going forward. We know there are areas in town that aren't in the immediate geographic area of any school, and they have to drive, and they're served by schools in different neighborhoods. We also know that VO is on the further end of town, and this creates a special challenge for the committee that's not easy to resolve. However, we believe that the very essence of supporting neighborhood schools means that areas closest to the school, areas in the school's own neighborhood, areas that are walkable without crossing busy streets, should remain within their neighborhood school. Indeed, they are the very essence of the definition of a neighborhood school. Removing these areas from the neighborhood school for the sake of areas that are a greater distance away or that require driving is contrary to what was expressed in our forum, as well as some of the considerations laid out. And we believe that moving these areas to other schools betrays that which makes Winchester the strong community that it is. As someone who moved here not that long ago, I was struck by the fact that within 2 weeks I met more neighbors than in 9 years in a house in a very nice suburban neighborhood in another state. That was amazing to me. And I lived in a neighborhood where my son did go to school, and we drove, and everyone drove to school and everywhere else. I felt like that was very much a big piece of why the vibrant community was here when I moved here. We have not only walk to school and home each day, but the Westland Walkers gathers a community at the Ambrose School after school each day, sometimes for more than an hour. Our children play together. They play after school. We have spontaneous play groups as a result of being outside every day, interacting heavily. Our students have a greater independence because they can walk to school. As they get older, they can walk younger siblings without their parents. It's a safe community. We've developed close ties and friendships via these walks, and we believe that it is very much part and parcel of what makes our neighborhood great. We understand that whomever gets redistricted will have to go through the transition to a new school. We know that's not easy. However, we believe that moving a great number of walkers would not only affect our students during those 6 hours a day they're in class, but I believe it would change their complete lifestyle. For our children, their lives are school and after school. And if after school changes that drastically, when we're in cars and we're coming home and we're going right into our garage, going right into our house, and that happens, that will drastically change not just their time within those 4 walls of the school, but also their lives overall. I promise this isn't that long. We as a group, as many people here, reviewed the 3 maps available and the considerations the committee has used to help drive decisions for these maps. Based on these considerations, including the stated values of maintaining walkability, keeping neighborhoods together, and diversity across the school communities, we feel that our neighborhood is a unique one in Ambrose. We are the only Ambrose neighborhood that can walk to school without crossing any busy streets. And in fact, we stay in our neighborhood the entire walk to school. There are no crossing guards. We are one of the more economically diverse neighborhoods in the Ambrose district as well. Moreover, we have ethnic diversity with Asian and Latino families in the Ambrose district. We knew that Ambrose would be one of the most affected schools just because of its proximity to VO. But we feel that philosophically, the walkable neighborhood that Ambrose actually geographically sits in should be protected. However, when we studied these maps, we felt that there are other reasons you should support Map J, Model J. We feel that it provides greater space for VOs, turnover of homes. I noticed in the previous slides, we didn't see them here, but the ones that were up on the side, one of the consideration bullet points was the idea that build it and they will come, that VO could experience greater growth than is projected. And we noticed that Model J has a 93% capacity in VO through the next 4 years, whereas the other two are almost at 100%. If Right Lock Farm is developed or there are other turnover of homes in that area at a high rate, that could definitely be a good positive thing for VO to have that extra 7% capacity versus 1 or 2% with the other models. It also appears that Model J provides a more walkable environment for additional students than current boundaries for both Morocco and Lincoln. So even though the grand total of students affected in this model versus the other two is slightly greater, you may have a net gain of walkers versus the current model and the other two options. Increasing, or at the very least, maintaining current walkers across the board is a win-win for the schools and the community. We know we need smaller school populations, but it doesn't have to be an either-or proposition. Model J does the best job of achieving both lower school populations and maintaining those walkable zones. Based on the numbers here, it also appears to us, looking at the maps for the first time, of course, that the Model J has the highest long-term sustainability of the three options. You see the percentage of capacity of most of the schools decreasing through 2016, except for Lynch, whose numbers are high in all three scenarios. And again, because VO's capacity is 93% there, it's a lot more palatable. And like I said before, and just to hit home this point, while Model J has a slightly higher number of students impacted, we would like to submit to the committee the idea that quality is as important as quantity. So for example, if 200 students are affected by one map, but most walkable zones stay intact, versus a map where 150 students are affected, but a great number of walkers are now being put in cars. We believe that the map with the lower number of students affected in the short term will in practice increase the number of cars that must now drive on the road and negatively impact neighborhoods at a greater rate than the other model. What I mean to say is the number alone is a data point, and we respectfully ask that the quality of the change be considered as much as quantity. Looking at Model F, some of the weaknesses we found were that some Lynch students are moved to Ambrose, as well as some Lincoln students who can currently walk to their school, even though Ambrose requires a net loss of students and Lynch requires a net gain, and moves walkers out of Ambrose. In fact, the neighborhood that Ambrose resides in, again, High Street, Cambridge, Wildwood, appears to be split apart. Model F looks like a clean model from a bird's eye view, but at the ground level, it rips our neighborhood apart and rips students off sidewalks and places them in cars. Also, reading the comments on the side, I know there are some other neighborhoods in the Lincoln District who also are walkable, and we're advocating to maintain that walkability, and they're also redistricted out in Model F. Model K also appears to be somewhat less sustainable than J, as Lynch is more than one class size over capacity by 2016, and yet VO is almost at capacity with no room for the unknown build it and they will come factor. Also, in Model K, we believe that economic diversity suffers. K appears to create the least diversity for Ambrose, cutting out much of our neighborhood, and the majority of the school will include mostly the affluent streets that currently reside in Ambrose. In addition, Model K doesn't appear to live up to considerations around walkability or the fact that Winchester families did express in large numbers their support for neighborhood schools. Ambrose appears to look like an island of red around other colors in Model K. The school is almost detached from its surrounding neighborhood. We don't believe this honors the true essence of what a neighborhood school is or what makes that model desirable. Because the walk to school is the daily habit that fuels our community and its daily interactions, it heavily influences our children's daily lives outside the school walls, and we believe it defines our neighborhood. Taking this away from the Westland walkers and the walkable Ambrose neighborhood will not just have a short-term effect on currently enrolled students. Rather, it will have long-range consequences affecting the daily habits, behaviors, and very character of our neighborhood. It threatens to irrevocably alter the fabric of our neighborhood for our children and for future children and residents. So as over the next few weeks you consider these models, we ask that you honor the true concept of neighborhood schools and how they enrich the town and its community feel. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the committee for their hard work as well. My name is Robert Tedesco. I'm here with my wife, Carol. We're at 44 Church Street, and our two children attend the Lincoln School. I think the walkability is the most important thing for us. We actually can see Lincoln School from our house. Two of the models indicate that we would then be bused to Ambrose. It just doesn't really make sense. We've always walked to school. On occasion, on a very rainy day or a snowy day, I have availed myself of the valet that's at the school. But it's really important to me as a father who doesn't have all that much time sometimes to spend with my children. That quality time, just that 5 or 10 minute walk every morning with my son and my daughter is something that is very special to me. The prepared remarks were wonderful, but I'm just speaking from my heart. And in that light, my children love Lincoln School. I can't imagine how they would really endure a move at this stage in their development. My son would be in 5th grade and had to move to Ambrose in two of the models, only to return walking to McCall again in 6th grade, and then walking to the high school. When we selected our home, we chose the location for the walkability. That's what we wanted. We live right in the hubbub of downtown, and it's an absolutely wonderful place to live. But there is a trade-off. There is very early morning noise. It's very busy. But what makes it worth it is that we can walk to school. And the fact that some of these models indicate that we would have to be using a bus or driving, it just does not make any sense at all to me. I don't know how you would slice it, how you could cut it up. It just doesn't make sense to take a family that can easily walk to the school and then be required to have their children ride a bus or be driven. It just doesn't make sense. So from what I can see, it's a little tough to pick up, but it looks like Model J shows no change for us. Again, when this kicks in, our son will be in 5th grade, our daughter will be in 4th. I had heard rumors, I don't know, maybe you can clear this up for us, that if there is a student that is in 5th grade, there might be some grandfathering or something. We've heard that bandied about. I don't know if that's true or not. If that were the case, then our son would be in 5th grade at Lincoln, our daughter would be in 4th grade at Ambrose, only again to return to walking to McCall, which is right next door. We're probably less than a quarter-mile walk, and the other maps indicate now it would be close to a mile to get to the school. So it just doesn't make sense. So we would hope that in our particular situation, and it's a very selfish one, that we would be allowed to stay at Lincoln. My children love that school. That's really what's important. We love it too. So thank you.
So when there's an opportunity, if there's a question or comment asked that we feel that we can address, we will take the opportunity to do that. I think that most comments we probably won't be able to address, and again, we're here to listen, but the issue of 5th graders. So that's not an issue that the Redistricting Advisory Committee will make a decision on, but that is a decision that the administration, working with the school committee, will make a decision on once a plan is approved. I will tell you that I will tell you that my intention will be to make every possible effort to allow 5th graders who have been attending a school, well, any 5th grader, I mean, if they move to 4th grade, I'm not going to discriminate, but I think what I'm saying is that we'll make every effort to keep those 5th graders in the school for their last year. I mean, that's really, that's something that we've already started talking about internally. So I just wanted to address that. I can't make any promises right now, but that is something we will really, that will be a top priority of mine. So, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bob Howard, and I live at 72 Sergeant Road here in town, my wife and 3 children. And if anybody knows anything about Sergeant Road, there's 2 parts to it, the part that comes off of Highland and the other part that nobody can seem to find. And we're on the other part. So when I look at the models here, I wanted to speak on Model K and Model J. In particular, Model K. This model takes 2 to 3 streets in our neighborhood, our East Hill neighborhood, and redistricts them to the Ambrose school. Now, when we talk about keeping neighborhoods together, safe walking routes, safe traffic patterns, in particular, keeping neighborhoods together, it's almost as if this particular consideration in the evaluation was completely overlooked. Like I said, you're going to take 2, 3 streets on east of Route 38 and now put them on the Ambrose School, where everybody else in this neighborhood will remain at the Lincoln School. If you look any further east or south, it's the city of Medford. And we already, any of the children who live in that neighborhood already went to school with any of the children in our neighborhood. So we already moved out on that. We did. And in particular, about 2 houses away from me is the city of Medford. So any of those children my kids are friendly with, but they were opposite schools already. Now, if you take the whole other side, just a little north of us, and even a little west of us, and you take all those children and keep them going to Lincoln, and ours go over to Ambrose. Now, you're really separating the neighborhood. You really are. Both Model K and J do that, but Model K in particular is doing that. And we talk about walking. We're already a good distance from the Lincoln, I'll say, but it's walkable. We've done it before. Walking may be a consideration up to the Ambrose in my neighborhood. So for my 3 children, to separate them from really most of the other children in our neighborhood, like I said, south and east, it's Medford, and now you're going to take away north and a little bit of west. I just think that's unfair to the children of that neighborhood, my 3 children, and there's other families with 2, 3, 4 children, kids who currently live with me, and we get separated from all their friends, and we really would take away that sense of neighborhood community that we do have now. We've only been in town close to 4 years, and everything that everybody says about Winchester is absolutely true. You couldn't find more friendlier people here, go out of their way to help you, and we moved into the neighborhood, we were welcomed right in, and I would hate to have that. That wouldn't be taken away from us, but for our children, things would change. It would change a little bit. Unfair to them. Thank you.
I live on Vine Street. The town strategic plan calls our neighborhood the Wedge Pond Hill neighborhood. So I have written a letter to the committee with signatures from 36 families in our neighborhood. So very similar to the first group that spoke, the Westland Walkers. I agree with almost everything they say. And as I'm speaking, I think what was requested is essentially, hey, can you come with some solutions rather than just problems? And I think I can possibly do that. So, yes. No one's ever going to be happy with any solution, though. And in fact, I've already emailed the committee with a couple of those ideas. So, walkability, as stated, I was happy to see, I guessed that it looked like Plan J took into account a half mile or less. I emailed 2 different sources to talk about a half mile really being what many experts say is what's truly walkable. In our neighborhood, of course, is a quarter of a mile, 0.39 miles from the Lincoln School. As my neighbor on Church Street said, from my front house, I'm staring at the school. So under Plan F, it would take us a mile away over to the Lynch School. So a couple of other thoughts that aren't even talked about, but worth noting that benefit the town as a whole. Our neighborhood, when they walk to school, walk right through the town center. So benefits the stores and restaurants. So, which I know, separately there's concern about keeping the town center vibrant. So that certainly helps, and Plan F would certainly reduce that, because you're taking a big group that walks right now back and forth at least twice a day out of that. A separate idea besides just walkability would be household demographics that's spoken about in the first speech as well. I would say that our neighborhood is currently the only one in the Lincoln School District that has a large concentration of multifamily and units and apartments. Our household income levels are more moderate on average than other neighborhoods in the Lincoln, Ambrose, and VO school district. So Plan F, I think it's potentially unintentional, but would propose moving us into Lynch and then moving part of the class over to Ambrose. What that results in is a higher concentration of more moderate families in Lynch and a higher concentration of wealthier families in Ambrose and Lincoln. So I realize that's not the design, but that is an unintentional result of Plan F. Multiple academic studies show a positive correlation between household income and student performance. Therefore, this appears to be counterintuitive as Lynch looks to improve its academic performance. Classroom sizes. So I know that as should be, is a key focus of the redistricting. So we agree that smaller classroom sizes should be one of the goals. However, we also believe this is still achievable while also prioritizing walkability and neighborhood cohesiveness by giving neighborhoods that are less than 25 miles, as you guys already said with Plan J, priority over neighborhoods that are more than 3/4 of a mile. So, one of the options that I mentioned, which won't be popular with everyone, is, for example, in the Lincoln School District, if you took Pierpont Road and south, that's all more than 3/4 of a mile away, and moved that would also, for the prior gentleman's comment, keep that whole group together. So, that's just one additional thought, keeps the whole group together, potentially moving them either over to Ambrose or, in the letter I mentioned that VO is actually only 2 miles away. So, one last thought with Plan F, which is interesting, is it actually expands north, which I don't understand why a small area into the Morocco School District, while taking, like I said, the Wedge Pine Hill neighborhood out. So, similar to the first group, we would strongly support Plan J with its walkability. Plan K would work for the Wedge Pine Hill neighborhood as well, but certainly Plan J overall looks to be the preferable model. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Syed. I live on the corner of Wildwood and Salisbury. In 2 of these plans, my son is currently going to Lynch School. In 2 of the plans, he would be transferred to VO. My concern is that my son is on the autism spectrum. He's very high functioning, very on the very low end. But that's kind of the motivation for us moving to Winchester. We've been here about 2 years, and he's thrived. He's made amazing advances going to Winchester. And so, personally, I'm just a little bit concerned about him being isolated even more, because we're right on the border. I think 2 streets over is one thing, and going on. I just want that to be a consideration, that people do take that into account. Because we've had great experience at this school, and I hope to continue. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Linda Rossetti. I have 2 children at the Lincoln School, and we live on Walcott Terrace. I can appreciate all the work that the committee has put into this. I can imagine a tremendous amount of work. And I can't help but responding to Bill's request for ideas. As I listened, I heard Bill refer to deferring the decision on the preschool until after your set of activities. And if I listened correctly, there's about 100 student capacity that's involved in the preschool. And I can't help but think that if we decided, either, I don't know if it's the school committee or this committee, on making a permanent decision on what to do with preschool, put it at Parkhurst or elsewhere. I guess Mystic might even be a choice. That would give additional capacity to this set of decisions and perhaps even reduce the number of families that might be affected by redistricting. And I would just, I can appreciate how complex this is, but I would just encourage the committee that if this is within your purview, let's make a call on where preschool is going to be in the town and invest that way and hopefully alleviate some of the challenges that are being posed by this redistricting.
Good. Hi, I'm Mary Larson. I live at 2 Marchant Road. I have one kid that's going to Lincoln this year and one that's going next year. Ideally, we would like to stay at Lincoln because we're counting down the days to both at the same school and we can walk all the time. Rather than on the rare occasions, my daughter's not schlepping a crate and schlepping back just so we can walk. On Model J, you carve out my road, which is my 2 kids and 1 other child. And we'll be all alone. We can't cross the street to go play with any kids on Main Street. We don't know the kids on the other side of Sergeant Road. We would be completely cut off and isolated. It would be like living in the country. So if you do go with this plan, I'm really hoping that you'll let my 2 kids and Catherine stay at their school and not be all alone. And not a preference. I know it's a long schlep for my kids and they complain, but it's still less than a mile and we walk. So, and I appreciate all the work and this is hard and do. It's a thankless job, so that's why I didn't volunteer. But we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, again, I'd like to thank the committee for their work. It is tireless work, and particularly after a long day, I'm sure for most of you. So thanks again. My name is Dave Walsh. My wife and I are owners at 38 Wedgemere. I grew up in Winchester, in that neighborhood, the flats, and went to Ambrose, and I was fortunate to make some lifelong friendships from that neighborhood. One of the things that concerns me when you look at the criteria articulated in terms of walkability, minimizing traffic, preserving neighborhood cohesiveness, it's actually a product of the last redistricting. The flats effectively have been chopped up, so you've got a situation where folks who live on one side of Foxcroft Street go up to Ambrose, and those in Army just the other side who would know those children. My son is not yet in the 1st grade, but who would know those children and know them otherwise are effectively going a longer distance to Lynch. The other consideration is just in terms of the walkability. Again, folks have made the observation when you look tops down at a map, things look different than they do on the ground, and I think that's a great point. When you look at the major streets like Route 3, you might make the inference it's a busy street. You don't want children going up there, but when you look at walking down the narrow winding street to Lynch School, a school that I've heard great things about and a lot of great parents are passionate about, it's a longer trip. It's 0.9 versus 0.3 for many of those neighborhoods in terms of miles. It's trafficy in terms of it's winding. There's not a straight sidewalk on the place. So I would just ask the committee in terms of both neighborhood cohesiveness, walkability, safety, to perhaps look at that. I know none of this is an easy answer, but those factors I think should be taken into consideration. And then lastly, in terms of the gentleman on the Medford line who made the observation in terms of being chopped up there a little bit with the streets, I think that's also a great observation. If you stop by the Flats neighborhood around 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you'll see a line of cars there waiting to drive kids across town. So it's really taken something, again, I grew up with a lot of my friends are still in Winchester, a lot of us have come back from the process, coming back. And again, in terms of that walkability, it might be something that you could take a look at in terms of just, in terms of finding a way to, again, keep that neighborhood dynamic. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks for your good work.
Hi, I'm Kristen Fitzgerald from Spruce Street in the Morocco School District.
And my friends and I respectfully do not like models K and F. Those two models put our little neighborhood so far from the proposed Lynch School District, and our little ones walk to school. We can see Morocco from our houses, and they all walk together with maybe one adult, maybe no adults. And the proposed K and F models put us so far from Lynch. I could not let them walk by themselves, and my friends would not. We couldn't. That would be like the furthest walk in the whole town. So respectfully, we do not like models K and F, but we do like model J. We would like to stay in Morocco. It just makes sense. We have a nice little thing going over there that we would like to keep going. In terms, most importantly, of safety for our walking children. And a lot of our parents work, so there are lots of kids walking alone in exactly where you propose we go to Lynch. A lot of those kids, they all walk alone to school, and that would just be like the worst walk ever. So we hope you go with Model J. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Remington. I live at 274 Cross Street, and I would like to thank the committee and tell you that I would be happy with any one of these proposals. Yay! My question, I think, is probably best suited for the superintendent. It's similar to the question about fifth graders getting grandfathered. I have two children. Neither of them are in the public school system yet. My son is finishing his last year of preschool and will go to kindergarten next year. Currently, we are districted for Morocco, but we are right on the line, and two of the models would send us to the Lynch School. As I said, we'd be thrilled to attend either school, but I would like to try to minimize the number of transitions my son needs to go through in a short period of time. And I'm curious whether the administration would consider letting a child like him, who we know is going to go to Lynch eventually, just go ahead and start kindergarten at Lynch rather than 1 year at Morocco and then 1 year at Lynch. Thank you.
Thank you for putting me on the spot. I guess my response is that certainly in the spirit of tonight, we'll consider anything. But that is a question that has been posed, and actually, one of the questions that there was actually some discussion about was, would we consider, all kindergartners who were entering for the first time in 2012, if they're going to be redistricted, go to their new school. And my very honest response is that, in general, I don't know, but I have to tell you, I don't think that, I'm not sure how that would work. So once a plan is finalized, I'm sure we would look at that, and if space was not an issue and we could make that work, I think it would receive high consideration.
Hi, my name is Jason Capodanno. I live at 97 Wildwood Street, part of Westland Walkers. Your job up there is thankless. I mean, your friends, your family, people you know every day are probably giving you suggestions and trying to help you out as best you can. You're trying to work with what's best for us in the town, and I appreciate that. I'm hoping today I might be able to give an idea that you might be open to. In your presentation, you talked about your top priorities being class size and population growth or sustainability. As a parent, my top priority is the safety of my child. And when I look at some of these options, I have to look at, if my child is going to walk to school, what does that mean for him or her? And in option J, model J, I think I'm most favorable towards model J with a few tweaks. Being the streets versus the backyard option, you split west of Cambridge Street, you split Wildwood in half. If you walk up Wildwood to go to VO, you'll notice you have to actually cross Wildwood or Johnson 3 separate times because there is no contiguous sidewalk that goes all the way up. And there's no crosswalk at that point or light at that point, which actually put, I feel my children in grave danger, especially looking at a street that's a 35-mile-an-hour street, and there's also police officers off and on it ticketing because of how fast people go from Lexington through to going, using that road as a cut through. So if looking at Model J, if you would be willing to maybe potentially amend some of those lines and using street versus backyards, I think you might be able to protect the safety of some of our children for that. And the second option that I don't know if you have thought about is we seem to have a lot of people that are right on the border, and that seems to be where the most concern or comments are coming from this meeting, is letting that option, people are right on the border, giving an open enrollment for 1 year, and letting those people choose, am I going to go to, in my case, VO or Ambrose, or in someone else's case, Lynch or Rocco, or someone else's case, it could be Ambrose or Lincoln. So if we give that street where it's split an open enrollment option, I don't know how that would affect your numbers, et cetera. I do appreciate the job you're doing, and it's thankless, but really I want to say thank you.
I'm Jeff McCarthy, and I live on Salisbury Street with a block between Foxcroft and Wildwood. I have three boys who will start entering the public school system in September. And one of the things I wanted to express was Model F. So I know that, one of the reasons we actually recently bought a house in the Flats area and moved there was because of that neighborhood feel. We know that where we currently bought is districted in Lynch, even though, Ambrose is much closer in proximity. And we accept that in the current redistrict because it keeps neighborhoods together, because at least you have that grid between Foxcroft and Wildwood, which goes to one school system. I know that redistricting is never going to make everybody in the town happy, but if you look at in most of the models, or two of the proposed models, the flats have always, been split. And in reality, it will probably always be split within 2 districts. But splitting it within 3 districts, you now carve out little sections of the flats and you kind of segregate them. So in Model F, you basically have 2 blocks of Salisbury and 1 half block of Wedgmere in the backyard model, where now those students will have to go to VO. So not only will they have to be bused to VO because it's over a mile away, but you also have the Route 3. And Route 3 is, I don't think, is a divider in the past, which has been a good divider because it's such a major road. And so it's not all, people will say, well, Ambrose is on the other side of Route 3. And the Ambrose kids have to cross Route 3 to get to, the current district of Ambrose has to cross Route 3 to get to Ambrose. So there's a crossing right there. But also the Ambrose school system is about 500 yards on the other side of Route 3. So now, it's not so much, it's the walking to school, but it's also a neighborhood. So you're taking 2 blocks of the flats and you're now putting them into VO. So when they are home from school, there's really no possible way that they'll be able to walk to a friend's house without being supervised all the time, because now they have to cross Route 3. So at least if you have, flats which you split into 2, you do have walkable neighborhoods where their friends will go to school with each other. And taking that one sliver and just segregating it, to me, does not make sense. Now, people talk about walkability, and so if you look at a lot of Myopia Hill, I think in one of the models, they stay in Ambrose. Well, the fact of the matter is, besides High Street, which is, walkable to Ambrose, when you have Swan, Myopia, McCall, do those students really walk to school and walk to Ambrose? Those roads don't have sidewalks, and they're very narrow and they're curvy, and they have to go out to Arlington Street, or they have to go out to Route 3. So really, when you talk about walkability, that neighborhood isn't a true walkable to any school. So putting that into Sonoan, but leaving, other neighborhoods that have proximity to a school that can walk, to me, makes sense. And you also have that one sliver which someone talked about Route 38, the East Hill area, right around the other side of Sims Corner. Taking that and keeping that in Lincoln, but kind of reshifting the Myopia Hill and keeping it in VO, and finding something that balances the flats, I think makes sense to keep what everyone here is talking about. And I don't know if you've looked at the flats, and instead of having that Foxcroft as kind of the divider, if you look at the parallel streets, and you keep the parallel streets together, where you keep Salisbury, Wedgmere, Yale, they're also closer in proximity to Ambrose, those students can walk in a quarter mile. You take Oxford, Cabot, and those streets, and you cut it there, and they go to Lynch. And so you're solving a proximity issue, and you're also keeping whole streets together, which I think is important, and for us, one of the reasons why we chose to move into that neighborhood.
Hi, my name is Salma Abunadi, and thank you so much for all your work. I definitely don't want to be in your shoes, but thank you for taking the time and making those decisions. I live on 114 Swanton Street, and we're definitely on that boundaries. And for me, what's more important is the safety. My kids, we do promote walking to school. And we're just encouraging my third grade son now to do it almost on his own with other kids. And he's so proud of himself to do that. And it gives him lots of confidence. And I have a younger child who's going to be either kindergarten or first grade next year. And I can't wait for both of them to go. So, and I know my son will be fifth grade when we're district. So if his grandfather, it's going to be a dilemma because I want him to be with his friends. But then I have my other son going to Lynch. And going to Lynch, if you live on Swanton or that area, you have to cross the Aberjona River. In winter time, you don't want to be walking on Swanton Street. It is not safe. And it's really, I actually looked at the distance. It's probably about 1.6 or 8 to go to Lynch. Versus Morocco 1.4, or even to Lincoln is 0.9. So we're really going to another side of the town that I don't feel it's walkable. And it's going to put lots of pressure on us because then we have to split now. So I really want you to consider that for families like us. And we make decisions to come to this town because of certain schools. So I don't want to be selfish to say, okay, people who are already in the school system should be staying in the school system. So the transition is tough for the kids. We're already invested in the school. We know how it works. We know the teachers. So switching the schools is really another effort from our part. Especially I'm not from the United States. It's really a new system. So you're just getting by. And it's really challenging to start again from scratch. So, and thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon. Good evening. I'm Dave Delow. I live at George Road. So I'm here for like the 34 families for the east half of the residents at Winchester. Also, including the family on Adams Street. So for us, we do have a big community there. So although it's small every time, but the affected family is pretty many. And for us, we don't have much options because for most other families, like okay, you could either maybe like those affected boundary areas. Maybe you might be at this side or that side, but for us, mostly like two options put us to the Lynch. Only the option of F, like okay, you could stay as friends, but we don't have any other side of. So as concerned about like keep the community together, if we could have for example, if we have the consideration like to put the whole community to Lynch side, do we have any other consideration like to the whole community to Morocco? I mean, do we have any kind of option for that consider? And like for us, at most you could stay at it, but mostly 2 of the 3 proposals put us to the Lynch. And also we talk about walkability. If like as currently we know before we move in, we know that kind the way is distributed, so each half of the community is kind belong to Morocco and else. And for walkability, to walk to Morocco, we could just, we could just walk across the big playground. So it's much better and easier walk for the kids. And at the home, they could play on big playground. But if we have to walk to Lynch, I may not consider that because all the busy road across the main street and all the small street, and so it's not that walkable. So that's kind of having some voice for my whole big community. So for me, like we would really, otherwise, as per the model point of view, Model J, as for my interested area, like we share off our area, but we gain at the south area. That doesn't make much sense for me. Like we share much off, then we could gain to get the number back. Model K, I would say it's minor change, maybe for sure, because it's kind of like overcrowded. So we might have to share off a couple of families, but like keep the impact as minimum as possible. Yeah. So if I could choose for my interested area, I would choose like F to keep it the best effort. But yeah, maybe we have to take some minor K that we have to share off a couple, but not like that many of that. Thanks.
Good evening, my name is Carolyn Fossey, and I live at 31 Sargent Road on East Hill. I live on the section of Sargent Road that is actually adjacent to Highland Avenue. And I just wanted to look at both models J and K through the lens of walkability and keeping the neighborhood together. Both J and K separate the East Hill neighborhood. And I just wanted to address the idea of safety, which was brought up as one of your primary concerns. Even though we are well beyond the half-mile walk to Lincoln, we walk every day to school. In fact, my kindergartner has walked to Lincoln all but 6 days this school year so far, and I intend to keep that up for the remainder of the school year. If we were to be switched to Ambrose, or if people in our neighborhood were to be switched to Ambrose, that would then switch our walk to 1.6 miles. It's not necessarily the distance, although it does increase it by a lot, but that would suddenly mean that we would have to cross Highland Avenue, Sims Circle, Main Street, and Cambridge Street. I don't really think that's safe for me to walk with my child, but I certainly wouldn't let my child walk across those 4 streets and dangerous intersections by himself. I would definitely like to either vote for Plan F or make sure that the East Hill neighborhood is kept together in either the J or the K model for the primary concern of safety and walking to school. Thank you.
I'm Kathleen Costello, and I'm at Yale Street. I live on Yale Street. I have a second, third, and fourth grader, and I have one going into kindergarten next year. And I would first like to say I'm really impressed by all these walkers. We don't walk to school, my kids, and simply because it's a fire drill in the morning, so I'm pretty much to blame, and so do they. But that's great that everyone walks. My main concern is my neighborhood. Right now, my husband and I bought our house 10 years ago, and we know our neighbors on half our street. So basically our neighborhood is completely cut in half and has been since we've moved there. I know there's a ton of kids my kids' ages on the other side of Foxcroft, but we don't know them. Their kids don't go to school with my kids, and unless they're playing a sport, they get to know them that way. We don't know them. Now, these models, you're further dividing my street up. So now my street will go to 3 different schools. And I just don't understand how that's fair. My neighbor, Tor, lives across the street from me. He'll go to VL. And then at the other end of my street, they're all going up to Ambrose, and we'll go to Lynch. So I just don't see how that is fair. And another thing is, the redistricting, I completely understand that's the way it happens. My husband grew up in town, grew up in Platts, when the Platts all went to Ambrose. He grew up with 8 brothers and sisters, and they all went to different schools because of redistricting. And that happens, and kids are resilient, hopefully, and I just would love to be able to have my kids play with their neighbors and get to know them without crossing a major road. So thanks.
My name is Dana Diamond. I also live in the Flats area on Wedgemere, the corner of Foxcroft. So I have one next door neighbor that goes to Ambrose, and we're the first house in the Lynch district. And we've heard a lot about the walkability in the cutting neighborhoods. And to reiterate Kathleen's point, we are already severed right down the middle, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think it made sense at the time, 20 years ago when we did it, but it has never made sense to me. And honestly, no one has mentioned this yet, and it seems like one of the priorities was minimizing impact to students and families, and I didn't really think about that as a priority with this whole redistricting. I looked at it as a blank slate to really make it right, that things have sort of moved piecemeal over the years to as we grew and had to move kids out of Lincoln to Ambrose and whatnot. But I thought that, you know, we as a town voted to build VO, even though it was just in one neighborhood, because it made sense for the whole town. And I think with that vote, that collective vote, I saw that as, you know, redistricting is a reality and lots of families can move. So I know change is hard, but I think kids are resilient. And I would like to see what some of these plans look like if we didn't worry so much about minimizing change, because maybe, you know, I think there's just a million situations in neighborhoods and streets that are not happy about walkability and splitting neighborhoods, but I just wonder if we had looked at it a little bit differently and people were willing to sort of make it right. Specifically about our neighborhood, I just urge you, I think the plans, I think it's F and J, are just, you know, don't make sense to have. I would have the same situation as Kathleen. There'd be 3 different schools attended by my street, and that's just not fair. It's not fair that there are 2, so you can't add a 3rd school. And lastly, I want to be careful about Lynch. It just worries me that of all the schools, it seems the hardest hit. You know, it looks like it's going to be busting at the seams more than any of the schools with most of these proposals. And we just have to be really careful there to keep parity, to make sure that as we add students, we can support them there. And we just need to be careful with that. So I urge us to look at the Flats neighborhood as one unified group and see where we can put that group.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay D'Angelo. I live on Town Way, and I actually live on the upper part of Town Way. And if you look at some of the plans, Town Way is another one of the streets that gets divided between the upper and lower part. I just want to reiterate the walkability versus safety issue, and then I want to propose something in sort of a different way. Currently, we walk to school, and Kate's family, is our principal at Lincoln, has the great term of the walkable school bus. And so we leave our house, we walk down the street, we pick up a family. If I'm not walking, my kids can walk with another family. They pick up another family along the way. Everybody comes onto Main Street, and Main Street is a carnival in the morning, right? It's always a zoo going to school. So there is a level of safety involved in allowing our kids at a much younger age to walk to school. My middle schooler walks to school now. You move out the door, he goes. So in the proposed plan, 2 of the proposed plans, one splits our neighborhood in various ways. Bob mentioned earlier the Sargent situation, and then it also splits Town Way in one of the other plans. So, you know, you divide the neighborhoods in 2 out of the 3 right off the bat, but then if you add the walkability versus distance situation to the scenario, you take an entire group of people who are walking and you dump them into a scenario where they were walking at most about a mile, but willing to do so, to now walking 2 miles, and there's no possibility of crossing 38, you know, at Sims Corner, Cambridge Street, up High Street. It's just not going to happen. So you've now dumped a whole group of families in its entirety under J onto the streets in cars. So that really is a big concern for us. We moved to town wanting. My husband grew up here. He walked to school. I grew up in a town that walked to school. I wanted my kids to walk to school. It's part of the community. I think everybody did an eloquent job in saying this. I don't think I'm saying something new. Everybody wants to walk. So my question is, you know, we looked at the model of let's look at a half mile as being the reasonable distance and sort of radiate out from that. What about looking at the people who are, there was no sense of, well, once you're outside of that range, how far are you willing to go? So we're a mile, so now we're 2 miles. As opposed to a family that's a quarter of a mile, well, now they're a mile. So is there a possibility of looking at what the percentages are in the increase in distance and what people are really willing to manage, or if it's even manageable? And it may change your existing plans. It may put fuzzier lines in there, but it just seemed to me to look at the greater good and look at those boundaries. Look at what that walkability distance really is, and then what people are willing to increase by, or what the greatest increase would be by. If you take something that is possible and you make it impossible. So that's sort of where we were looking. And my cronies all started looking at. And the other thing is to look at sort of pay and that divided neighborhood with Sergeant and Townway and people being split. Literally, and walking, like I'm on the upper part of Townway, so I go to Lincoln, but my son's best buddy who lives on Standish is now going to Ambrose. So you take away that neighborhood sense of who's playing with who. And at that point, it's like, we might as well either live in Medford or Lexington, because those are the two extremes for that. So it just seems a little isolated for us.
My name's Chloe Durant, and I have a kid who's in 2nd grade in the Lynch School District and one at McCall. And I want to thank all the volunteers. No good deed goes unpunished. I just want to say that it's a testament to how wonderful our town is that everyone is so fiercely protecting their neighborhoods. And I appreciate that. I just want to reiterate what Dana said about trying to do the right thing in the town. Where I live on Ardley Road is near Winter Pond. There's no way I'm going to be redistricted, ever. But I dare you. But it just seems that kids are really resilient. I had, my kids went to school in Lexington for preschool and then St. Mary's. Although it was a pain to drive, even though I could walk to Lynch and then have to drop somebody off at St. Mary's, it made sense for me because I felt like I was getting the best for each child by doing that. And my suggestion would be to move the kindergarten and preschool to Parkhurst. This seems to relieve the numbers at all the schools that you're proposing. There's approximately 60 kids at every school that's in kindergarten. By doing this, you can renovate the facilities made for smaller children, which I know we're having an issue with that at Lynch right now because we need new bathrooms, and the question is, do we have small toilets for the little teeny kids, or do we have bigger toilets for the 5th graders? In that case, it would create more of a town community, which is a lot of people are talking about how they don't know their neighbors who are living on the same street. But if we're all in kindergarten and preschool together, you get to meet everyone in town instead of, by the time they get to middle school, you are not in the school anyway, and you're not meeting the parents from other schools at that point. The kindergarten and preschoolers aren't walking anyway, so they're going to be dropped off, and this is going to alleviate the drop-offs in the elementary schools. I know at Lynch, I don't know how we're going to take more families. The parking is a total nightmare already, as I'm sure it is at every school. And with that, you can adjust the times to accommodate the drop-offs at the other schools so that it's just smaller kids. So I just want to say one other thing, that for Lynch, if the Flats is considered its own entity, Lynch isn't willing to give up the Flats because, in my opinion, that would create a poor school, and we need the volunteers and the money that come from the Flats to help our school. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ralph Collins from 27 Pilgrim Drive. I just wanted to be a strong advocate for class size as a key criteria for the committee. I think there's been a lot of advocates for walkability in neighborhood schools, which I think are wonderful goals for the community to consider. But for me personally, I'm less concerned with how my children get to school than the quality education they get inside the classroom. And I think the size of the class is a direct correlation to the quality of education that they'll get. So I'd just like to continue to encourage the committee to consider class size as the top priority for education for my children for Winchester. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Kavanaugh. I live over on Corolla Road, right by Sims Corner. And in looking at the three different models that have been presented, when we talked earlier, when we were speaking earlier about trying to keep neighborhoods together, the one thing that kind of was a little unusual to me was maybe a little bit on the selfish side, I would say, but Model K basically takes my house and my neighbor's house, two houses on our whole street, and puts us into the Ambrose School District. The entire remainder of the street stays on Lincoln. So as far as trying to keep cohesiveness of the neighborhood, all of a sudden we're kind of the stepchild no one wants to talk to, almost off on the side, going off to Ambrose, where our neighbors that we actually, most of it, we're closer to the Rotary, so we're actually closer to Lincoln than even some of our neighbors, yet we get bounced further away. And also too, if I can say, the other problem I think with the Model K is that, just from my own observation, hopefully the street that's adjacent to me, Stoll doesn't mind me saying this, it's the only model where they are being shipped over to. And from the day we moved into the house, before our kids ever even made it to Lincoln, I noticed that it's like their own little pack, their own little neighborhood, where the moms and the kids and the dads, they walk as a contingency to a school every morning. So to shift that group over to Ambrose as well, I mean, we've talked about how important it is to try and build as many numbers as possible to be able to walk to school. And you have the more you move people that are willing and close enough. I mean, basically we can say we're going to walk to school, we're not going to walk to school, but a lot of it comes down to geographic. I understand that. You have to kind of say what makes the most sense, what people are really going to walk, percentage-wise, given distance and things like that. And I think, and also history as well proves it too. And just to reiterate, I hope they consider not considering Model K as far as redistricting. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Roy Procops. I live on McCall Road in the midst of Myopia Hill. I have two daughters, one going to Ambrose and one that will be in the school system in a couple of years. One thing I just wanted to speak is for our neighborhood, Myopia Hill, contrary to what a previous gentleman assumed about our neighborhood, there are a group of families, second and third graders, that do walk to Ambrose from down on the hill. It's really not such a bad walk. Across streets, have almost no traffic. Arlington Street is pretty wide, has big curves and big areas on the sides of the curves, and still not much traffic in the morning on Arlington Street, so a lot of us do make the trek up the hill in the morning. And also Ambrose School is kind of our neighborhood school. I mean, it's where kids go to play, it's where my kids learn to ride their bikes, just is a part of our neighborhood. It's really one of our closer playgrounds. The other thing I wanted to mention is, earlier, Mr. McCall spoke of there had been a consideration of moving preschool to BO, and it seems that one of our big problems is how do we fill up BO now that we've built all this extra space in Vincent Owen. And, that can be reconsidered. It seems like it would allow a number of redistricting options that would help a lot of neighborhoods. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephen DiCanto. I live in Blossomville Road, so I'm currently in the Ambrose School District. Right off the top, I will say I favor a plan that encompasses most of the elements of J. And then I'll talk about maybe a few tweaks if that might be helpful. But first of all, Superintendent Collins, thanks for your time, and the redistricting committee and the school committee members of the year, Lieutenant Michael. One good thing about this meeting is, and the school committee should take great pleasure in, is no one has slammed any school in town not wanting to go to that school. It's simply talking about preferences as far as neighborhoods and walkability. So all the schools in Winchester are great. I should preface that also by saying I was born and raised in Winchester. When you talk about walkability, my parents built a home in Franklin Road before I was born, and my sister went to Mystic School, which is now the recreation center, and then my older brother and sister went to St. Mary's. And before my mother knew where I was at St. Mary's when I was 4 years old, walking down from Franklin Road. Walkability wasn't so much an issue back then when I grew up in town. But I also have another perspective that I can offer the committee and the members of the town folk that are here. I've been a real estate broker since 1991 in Winchester. I have dealt with clients that have looked in similar towns with good school systems, for instance, Lexington. As you know, Lexington is a much larger town. It's about 16.5 square miles. Winchester is 6 square miles. But the big difference between the communities is this. The neighborhoods in Lexington are widespread. There's a difference in the sense of community in that town. It offers great schools, and it has a great community center, but Winchester's small, cohesive neighborhoods are built around, for the most part, proximity to the school. And I did mention that I support Jay, and I'll just take a quick peek at K, for instance. If you look at Model K, it indicates, and I'm just going to be selected as far as Ambrose School, 58 children impacted at Ambrose School, but that 58 comes from a very close-knit neighborhood within about 2.2 miles to 0.23 miles. And our kindergartners and our first graders and second graders do walk to school from these neighborhoods. So the 58 children that are impacted come directly from those neighborhoods. And there would be New Meadows Road, Albemarle, Wildwood, Blossom Hill, and Westland, for the most part, and some of Atherton and Birch Hill. It's a very small group, and it makes it very appetizing for the redistricting committee, and I don't fault it, to take that group and put them up to VO, because it's a nice handful of students that kind of fills VO. But the other thing interesting to note is that Morocco School enrollment grew radically in the mid to late 90s because of the turnover of homes in that area. And I would venture to say that the dynamics of the town, there's been turnovers in the flats, and you couldn't buy a home in the flats in the early 90s. People stayed there until the children got out of college because people didn't need to buy up. They already had a large enough house if their family expanded. The next area, I would say, in Winchester that is due for family expansion will be what used to be called the Estates area. That will be Squire Road, Thornbury. That whole area has more senior living in those homes, unoccupied by children, and we are starting to see those homes sell. And we're also seeing those homes sell and get knocked down and larger homes built for families. So Jay has the greatest sustainability that you're offering right now as far as enrollment. It offers the most available space in Vincent Owens, and I would hate for us to be down the road 5 or 6 years from now and saying, geez, we didn't really quite anticipate the turnover or the population growth in this section of town, and all of a sudden we're booked to capacity there because we pulled a large number of families out of the existing neighborhood schools to fill the new spaces, new classrooms in Vincent Owens. And the other model that we have here that was a part of this was addressed briefly recently by a speaker who lives on Arley. She was concerned that if too much of the flats get chopped up, the school would lose some economic viability. But as I look at this plan, I see on Model F, I would say the largest percentage of homes in Winchester, I'll just pick a number, over $1 million, are on that plan for Ambrose School. So in my view, if I look at that, I would say that the most affluent neighborhood then would become the Ambrose School neighborhood. And I remember in the early 90s when that was kind of touted as the school to go to, and other sections of town took a little bit of umbrage on that. Fortunately, now all of our schools are equal, and we'd like to keep them that way. But if you want economic diversity, that is not the plan to go. That's, when I look at the map, I see the largest concentration of affluent neighborhoods within that, or affluent streets within that particular plan. So my suggestion is, in Model J, although when the group of us looked at this and said, geez, unfortunately, in the far southern part of the town, it seems like that little group was handpicked to get upset about this. This particular plan is the least disruptive as far as the existing lines go for the current school districts, except for the most part, that little section of town, Sergeant Way and Marshall Road. So I was wondering if the school committee and the redistricting committee could take a look at that portion. We've had some people speak about this here tonight, of how upsetting it would be to their family dynamics and their relationships in the neighborhood, to perhaps consider grandfathering those properties or those families the right to continue to go to their schools. It might upset the balance a little bit, but you might be talking about 10 or 15 families that will stay in the current school, and they'll be through that school in 2 or 3 or perhaps 4 years. In that way, it would satisfy their concerns in their interest in maintaining their family or neighborhood viability, and be otherwise the least disruptive plan that you've got on the table tonight. So my suggestion is, if you could take a look at the folks that feel most aggrieved by any plan, and see if there's a way to grandfather them in, and then once either the house is sold, it's part of the new district that you like, or once that family is, I hate to say once the kids are about to school, but basically, once the family moves, that house becomes part of the new district, or whatever other model would work for you to maintain their sense of what works for them. At the same time, please be considerate of the largest, closest neighborhood to an elementary school that would be most impacted by most of the models you've got here, aside from Jay. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Shigad. I am a resident on Wildwood Street, and I have 2 children at the Lynch School. When I looked at the proposals, to me, the plan that made the most sense was Model K, and I know that there's been people that don't like Model K, but what I liked about it the most was, one, it preserved the makeup of the school, the current school, the best, and it did keep the Flats neighborhood into only being split in half as opposed to in 3 ways. I also like the Route 3 line, just seemed to be very clean and simple, and I know that was one of your objectives. And I know that parents have had concern about crossing that Route 3 line, so I think, to me, that makes sense to keep that. I also would really urge you as a committee to consider the fact that Lynch is a technically a failing school. We all know it's not failing, but under the No Child Left Behind Act, it is deemed as a failing school. And if there's anything that you can do as part of the redistricting to help Lynch move out of that status, I would encourage you to at least consider that, as all children in Winchester deserve access to the same education. And to have one failing school and 4 non-failing, to me, just doesn't seem fair. So if there's something that you can do through the redistricting, to me, that now is a good opportunity. Thank you.
My name is Laura Scott. I'm at 34 Arlington Street, and I just want to put my vote in for Model F. Actually, the entire town, I haven't really looked at how every little street has been affected all over town, so I'm just looking at my neighborhood, which I think a lot of people are. And so I'm not against the other models, but specifically the area from High Street to Cambridge, I know a lot of people are not concerned about that area. They think, there's a lot of affluent families in that area, and they want to, but, it doesn't seem like such a big deal to send them over to the L. But I will say that, well, first of all, there are a lot of affluent families in that area that send their kids to private schools. So those of us that send our kids to the public school here, we really do appreciate that, for one, we can walk to school. And a lot of people, someone said that we don't walk to school. And actually, if you ever look at Arlington Street, if you ever drive down Arlington Street, there are people walking on Arlington Street all the time. And a lot of families walk their kids to school in this neighborhood from High Street to Cambridge. And to take those families to Vincent Owen, you're actually at least tripling the distance of their walk. Right now, we have about a quarter-mile walk, I would say, to school, and it would be probably a mile and a half with certainly busier roads in there for us to try and walk to Vincent Owen. And so that neighborhood, even though the other models do keep the neighborhood together, it is no longer a walkable area. That's one thing. And the other thing I will say is we moved here from Newton, where we lived about 7 years. We didn't know any of our neighbors in Newton, even after living there for 7 years. And we lived here for 3, and it is absolutely through the school district, through going to Ambrose and being part of a neighborhood and a community, that we actually know so many of our neighbors. We have one neighbor on one side of us who actually sends their daughter to a private school. And we got talking one day, and she said to me, you know more of the neighbors than I do, and they've lived there 20 years. And I absolutely attribute that to being part of the neighborhood school. And someone mentioned how that is defined as being certain proximity to the school, and right now we are within that proximity to the school, and we would not be if we're redistricted. So I would hope that you would take a look at that and consider that. And it's not a lot of students there. I can't imagine that it makes a huge difference to send those kids to Vincent Owen as opposed to Ambrose. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to mention. I mean, again, the walkability, we walk there not only to school, but we walk there on weekends, we walk there during the summer on nice days, we play at the park at Ambrose, and we see all the other families who go there, not just at school, but after school, summers, weekends, and again, Vincent Owen. We don't walk to that playground because it's just too far. So we wouldn't walk to school there, we wouldn't walk to play there, and it would just take us out of that neighborhood community that we've become a part of, which I would find very disappointing. So I hope that you'll consider that neighborhood when you make your decision.
Hi, thank you for all your work. I know this is getting late, I'll try to be really quick. I want to speak in support of Plan J and Carl Rexer. I live on Vine Street next to Wedge Pond. I think the walkability is very, very important. Certainly it's been very important in our household. My son's now in 8th grade, and he's been driven to school twice. So he walked from kindergarten till now, and he's been driven to school twice. I really regret the day that he decided he didn't want his father walking with him anymore in the morning, and that was just a couple of years ago. But I think there's a couple other points about walkability and there's been a lot of people speaking out for walkability being very important. But I think there's a couple other points about walkability that other people haven't mentioned that I want to make sure are also mentioned. One is, with all the talk about childhood obesity, I think that we need to try to do everything we can to keep our children active. And getting them active, especially early in the morning before their brains are ready to learn, I think can be very important for instilling those sorts of activity habits in our children. And I think walking to school is a very important thing in that way. Also, getting the blood pumping, getting them walking to school actually has been shown to make them learn better than if they just sit in a car before they get to school. So I think that sort of school performance is also enhanced by walkability. And the third point about walkability I'd like to make is that it also helps enhance our home values. When we bought our home in Winchester in 2000, we did look at walkability as we were looking at homes that we were trying to buy in several different communities. And buying a home that we bought was partially because of its proximity to the town center, and especially the 3 schools and the library in the center of town. And we know that other people do that, and we know that not just for us, but we know that it's other people that take that into consideration as well. When we see the realtors often are marking that when a home is walkable to schools, they have walkability indexes, walkability factors that can be calculated with various websites. And that's often mentioned by realtors when they're trying to talk about how nice a home is. Walkability is a major, it can be a factor for many people. So I think it helps to enhance our homes and maintain our home's value by going with something like Plan J that helps to enhance walkability as much as possible. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Bernal. I live on Sergeant Road and go to Lincoln School. I have 2 girls in kindergarten and in 3rd grade. The only model that keeps our neighborhood together, which is the East Hill neighborhood, is Model F. And both of the other models would require people in our neighborhood to walk through Sims Corner. There is really no crosswalk at Sims Corner, so it's unwalkable. I'll be really brief, but I also want to address Model J quickly. Model J seems to come close to keeping our neighborhood together, but it's lopped off a piece of our neighborhood and put it in Ambrose, and then it's lopped off a piece of Ambrose, and put it in Lincoln up above. You would seem to be, someone else addressed a point similar to this. Switching those 2 lopped off pieces, I don't know about the number of students in those 2 different areas, but if you switch those 2 areas, you might have a model that helps a lot of more people be satisfied with Model J. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Margaret Ferrari. I live at 13 Cabot Street, and I'm a Lynch parent. Originally, I was going to get up here and tell you that I support a modified version of Model K, but then after listening to everybody, especially these 2 rows who hate me for saying that, but not modified, I thought about how we're building a state-of-the-art school up at Yale. So the most important thing is with this state-of-the-art school, make all the other schools better. And I speak from Lynch because Lynch is probably on the further end of the spectrum from what VO will become in terms of what it has to offer, the classrooms, the materials, all those physical things. With that being said, I ask that you don't clip off streets. So when I hear parents talk about 2 houses on my street are going to be moved to another district, but the rest of our street stays, please don't do that. I ask that you keep in mind that with this state-of-the-art school, how is Lynch going to be affected? Because we can barely support what we have now. Is there a way for it to become more equitable between at least those 2 schools? And I also ask that you keep in mind, I grew up in Winchester. I went to Bartlett, which was Parkhurst, and then I went out of town to a private school, and I came back to finish at the high school. I never walked a day in my life to school. But I see as a parent how unbelievably awesome and important that is to the kids. And as some of the parents said, kids are resilient. They can be moved around. They can be affected. But when you clip off a couple houses on a street, or like the one gentleman off of Route 38 where he and him had a house, that makes it really tough. So I ask that you consider those 2 things selfishly, and also please don't split the flats up into 3 sections. I've been through 2 redistrictings in the flats from growing up there, and to make it be 3 different schools would just make it even harder for the kids who are in the 2 schools, because we are a real neighborhood. I know everybody else feels that they're in a real neighborhood.